I do want to talk about another very notable moment during that town hall that's getting a lot of attention, which is when Donald Trump was asked about IVF and protections and access to IVF. Donald Trump essentially said he loves that issue and that he is the father of IVF. I want you to take a listen to how he put it.
It's back in the states where they can have the vote of the people. It's exactly where they want to be. Remember this issue has torn this country apart for 52 years. So we got it back in the states. We have a vote of the people, and it's working its way through the system. And ultimately, it's going to be the right thing. And IVF, you had mentioned before,
right,
IVF.
Let's get this question, because I believe that's what this is about.
Oh, I want to talk about IVF. I'm the father.
You don't hear that every day.
I'm the father of IVF.
Now, Boris Brenna, the first part of that question, he was talking about access to abortion. But look, obviously it was a bit of a weird comment when he said, I am the father of IVF. We know that IVF really started in the 70s. But when I talked to Donald Trump's team about this, I tried to get an answer on what exactly was he trying to say there. And they argue that this is an issue that Donald Trump believes that he really set the tone for within the Republican Party. And they pointed back to, in February, that Alabama Supreme Court ruling where essentially they had ruled that frozen embryos are children. And then that led many hospitals and clinics to pausing IVF treatments. Donald Trump came out on that and said, I support IVF. The party should support IVF. And really since then, I can tell you from my conversations with people close to the former president that this is something he brings up a lot, particularly when people ask him, why do you not think that why aren't you doing well with women voters? And remember, that was what this town hall was all about, him trying to narrow that gender gap with Harris. And he often argues he's not sure. He thinks they don't like his rhetoric, but that they should like him on the issues. And this is one of the issues that he often talks about. So I think that's where a lot of this was coming from, despite it being a bit of an odd answer.
Yeah, he clearly believes it will help him. Elena Treen, thank you so much. We want to drill down now on the question of the gender gap by starting with a look at where the presidential race stands right now. Let's take a look at a new CNN poll average. Right now, there is no clear leader in this race. An average of 51% of likely voters support Vice President Harris, while 48% back former President Trump. But this relatively small gap falls within the margin of error. On the other hand, the gender gap remains quite wide. A recent ABC News poll, and Ipsos also is included in that poll, found a 17% difference based on gender. Trump winning male voters by 8 points, as Harris leads by 9 among women voters. Zooming in specifically to the support for Harris among women, they're bolstered for her by women under 40, black women, and Hispanic women. Meantime, the margins for Republicans among white women seem to be dwindling, and this is raising all sorts of alarms for the Trump campaign. In 2012, Mitt Romney, who famously had a line that he regrets, I'm sure, about binders full of women, he was up by about 9 points. Then 4 years later, and the Access Hollywood tape later also, we should note, Donald Trump was up 6 points. Most recently, he built on that in 2020, getting a 7-point advantage among white women. But if the current polling holds on Election Day, Donald Trump would only be up +1. That would be the lowest margin for Republicans among white women in this century. Trump's running mate, J.D. Vance, acknowledged that gender gap last night during an event in Pennsylvania, and he made this direct appeal. Listen.
The polls also tell you that we're doing better. President Trump and I are doing better with male voters, and the Democrats are doing a little bit better with female voters. Well, I think moms are the best ambassadors to say, look, don't believe the lies that you've heard about these guys. Vote for what's in your best interest. Vote for public safety. Vote for lower grocery prices for your family. Vote for, housing prices that are affordable for normal people to live in American homes.
We'll see if that pitch and Trump calling himself the father of IVF during that town hall on Fox News might move those numbers in either direction, Brianna.
Now to Trump's attempt to cut into his opponent's lead with women voters. Today, Mr. Trump participated in a Fox town hall with an all-female audience. One issue he was pressed on is fertility treatment access and how he would protect it if elected.
I'm the father of IVF, so I want to hear this question. And we really are the party for IVF. We want fertilization, and it's all the way. And the Democrats tried to attack us on it, and we're out there on IVF even more than them. So we're totally in favor of it.
So let's bring in my panel to talk about this. So Maya, Mr. Trump claiming to be the father of IVF. I'm sure you don't agree, but do you think that the Harris campaign has done everything it needs to do to fight that argument from the Republicans that they are completely supportive of IVF?
Well, yeah, because it starts with the fact that, and the campaign has been reminding the American public of this, and Kamala Harris herself, that it is in fact Donald Trump who both ran in 2016 on a platform of overruling Roe v. Wade, which opens the floodgates for exactly what we saw in Alabama, which was the wake-up call for a lot of people that even the ability to try to be a parent could be under attack when Roe v. Wade is gone, but also, make it very clear exactly what, as a campaign and as a president, this vice president would do, which is ensuring that there's access to the health care that is reproductive rights, that is getting the government out of the bedrooms of so many Americans. And Donald Trump himself has not actually made clear, and Republicans themselves, whether or not they'd actually support legislation nationally that would ensure that there would be IVF for families.
Brian?
I think he's been abundantly clear. He's been on television saying that he would either support some federal intervention with respect to IVF, or that he'd force insurance companies to backstop the funding. And so when he makes this statement, he's sort of the father of IVF. It's in gist. But if you look at what he's done with the Republican Party, he's moved into a position where it was sort of moving further and further to the right, and President Trump said, wait a second. I believe in sending it to the states, and as we send it to the states, we should have the states have the opportunity of what they need to do. Some states are going to ask for, some states are going to be more restrictive than others, but at the federal level, we're going to fund IVF, and we're going to make sure the insurance companies backstop it. That seems like a clear policy that's appealing to women.
Maya's giggling, so I want to let her.
I'm giggling because it's complete revisionist history. I mean, first of all, you have to start with the perspective that sending a fundamental right back to the states is saying there isn't a fundamental right. He's actually made very clear, and as has the Supreme Court, he created that they think they should go after contraception next. If that's what Clarence Thomas frankly said. But remember that what we are talking about is sending a fundamental right back to the states when we have undermined the very voting rights protections of people to make choices about who's making those decisions in state houses.
So let's talk about his answer on abortion access, which he also was asked about today. Again, this is at the Fox town hall, so don't accuse me of picking issues having to do that Democrats like. This is what the Fox people put up there. Let's run that clip.
The states are now voting for it. And honestly, some of them are going much more liberal, like in Ohio. I would have thought it might be a little bit different. And some of them are not, but it's going to be redone. It's going to be redone. You end up with a vote of the people. And some of them, I agree, they're too tough, and those are going to be redone.
So I have seen some conservative commentators, anti-abortion, pro-life commentators, saying that Donald Trump moderating his position on this, as Brian, you were kind of talking about just a second ago, actually risks alienating people who are anti-abortion. What do you think?
Look, I think that he said the same thing that he said during the June 27th debate versus President Biden. He's been consistent that this is an issue that's gone back to the states, Jake. I don't think that this is going to alienate any of the Trump base at this point in time. We're 3 weeks out from the election. This has become a race all about the gender gap. President Trump needs to do everything within his capacity to close the gap as much as possible with women. And this is a campaign issue for Harris. The only chance for her to win at this point is to really run up the score with women. That's why it's a conversation we continue to have. Last point, this was in Georgia. Trump's at 52 in the latest Quinnipiac poll.
Let's talk about that. I want to bring this up right now. So Maria, there are new swing state polls out today from Quinnipiac University. Their survey shows Trump maintaining a lead in Georgia, 52-45. In North Carolina, the race is still tight, 49-47. No real leader that's within the margin of error. That's not where she wants to be in Georgia or North Carolina.
Sure, and the smart thing is for the campaign to be worried, to be anxious, because that's the only way you win. Because I can show you polls where she's actually ahead in every single swing state. So the swing state polls are not all of that. You can't hang your hat on them. And I hope that they don't, because they should act like they're 10 points behind, both nationally as well as in the swing states. But let's go back to this reproductive rights issue. It's clearly not the only issue that the Harris campaign is focused on, but
It's a big one.
It is a huge one, and it is a huge one because it affects so many families in this country. And let's talk about this. This is not just an esoteric issue of whether it should go to the states, whether it should have stayed in the Supreme Court. This is an issue that should go to the women.
Yeah.
Women should be the only ones to decide. Last time I heard states don't get pregnant, it's women who get pregnant, and they should be the ones to decide.
This is the Harris chance to win. She is no longer leading in any of the 7 swing states. The
That's
bottom
not
line,
true.
and we see it in all of the
We
data.
just saw it. He just showed a poll in
averages.
Pennsylvania where she's ahead
the real,
like 2
the real
points.
clear politics averages, to be clear, they're tied or Trump is ahead in all 7. The stories this morning about the NBC poll, there was a fresh Wall Street Journal article this morning by Catherine Lucy. The gender gap is real. Harris's only chance to win at this point is she must run up the score with women, especially college-educated women. The other demographic groups that she need are walking away from.
All right, thanks to our panel. We could talk all day.
Joining us now to discuss all of this is Republican Congresswoman Nancy Mace of South Carolina. Congresswoman, thanks for being with us. I wonder if you think Trump can win if he doesn't do better than that, up about just 1 with white women.
Well, I think it's up to the voters, right? So in a couple of weeks, in 20 days or so, the country will decide. I do think he's peaking right now, that his numbers are increasing. And I live in a swing district. I live in the only swing district in South Carolina. And I've been talking about women's issues since Roe v. Wade was overturned. I've been screaming it from the rooftops about how we need to show that we as Republicans support women. And in the 2022 cycle, in swing districts like mine and in swing states across the country, about 55% of the electorate were female voters. This is not a voting bloc that anybody can ignore, Republican, Democrat, or Independent. It's one of the strongest voting blocs in this country, and it's the reason why I talk to women day in and day out. I was really glad to see that Trump did an all-women's town hall. I think it's really important to speak to an audience that is going to decide this year's election.
And do you think with what he's polling right now, that it could mean he loses because of this voting bloc?
Well, I think it's really hard to say. There are other factors at play. It's not just female issues like abortion and IVF and rape and incest. It's also about the economy and inflation. The cost of baby formula over the last 4 years has gone up about 31%. Gas is up 40%. So there are still some kitchen table issues that voters, male and female alike, will take into consideration. And then the other elephant in the room is illegal immigration. We've seen the effects of fatal fentanyl on the streets. We've seen the effects of, violent, illegal criminal aliens who are here. And so there are other factors at play, but you cannot discount abortion. You cannot discount the female voter. And it's why I work really hard to earn the votes of women in my district and across South Carolina.
Yeah, abortion is a big issue for women. And at this Foxtown, I know you have been sounding that alarm, just to be clear. There's been a lot of reporting about that. At this Foxtown hall that was taped last night, he said some states have enacted abortion restrictions that are too tough. That's his quote, too tough. And he said, quote, those are going to be redone because there's a movement in those states. Which state with a tough abortion ban have you seen that is actively working to make it less tough?
Well, the states that have virtually no exceptions, not even for life of the mother, rape or incest, or fetal abnormalities, that is at a bare minimum for those that have banned it. It's a very small percentage of abortions, but there is a lot of common ground on the issue. And I know, as Trump was one of the first Republicans, myself included, I was the first Republican in Congress to speak out about the IVF ruling in Alabama. So too was Trump. And so, we know that he's going to be a strong voice. He put IVF in the Republican platform. He put the fact that Republicans want to protect access to birth control and contraceptives in the Republican platform. It had never been done before. This is a fight I've been making alone for a long time, as you know, since overturning of Roe v. Wade. And I'm glad that, if he becomes president, when he does, that I have someone that I can go to and talk to about women's issues, because I do truly believe he gets it. He had his granddaughter on stage at the RNC at the convention giving a speech. The women in his family are leaders in the public and private sector. So I think we see someone who is passionate about women's issues. I've talked to him about it privately and publicly, but it will be up to the voters to see what they say in November. It's why it's so important that he's stressing the women vote, and it's why it was important he had that all-women's town hall today.
But what is he talking about? Because it's been years now since since the Dobbs decision, and these states that lack what you consider reasonable exceptions have not adjusted them in a way that you clearly think would be smart.
Well, I think the smart thing to do for all states would be to put it as a ballot referendum. What are the voters in your state, even red states? I think that elected officials would be very surprised to see where voters are. Again, I'm in a purple pro-choice district.
Okay, but I just want to get back to the question. I do want to just get back to the question because I hear what you're saying on that proposal, and there are certainly people who agree with you on that, but that's not what these states are doing. So back to what Trump is saying about these are going to be redone because there's a movement in those states. There doesn't actually appear to be a movement in those states. Correct me if I'm wrong on that.
Well, I think every state is working through their own state laws now, and I'm in South Carolina. There's a fetal heartbeat with exceptions for life of the mother, rape, and incest. Other states are doing other things. Some are all pro-choice, some are pro-life with exceptions. I think every state at this point is obviously very different, and some might still be in the process of changing their state laws too.
And a number of them are not, just to be clear. Trump calling himself the father of IVF. Does that go over well with most women?
Well, I mean, it goes to show, again, he was one of the first people in the party when that crazy Alabama ruling came out a few months ago, banning essentially IVF in that state. He was one of the first people to come out publicly and say, no, we're going to protect women's access to IVF. And he's gone so far as suggesting that the government should pay for it. And so I think he really believes in IVF and wants women to know that he's going to be right there with them to ensure that they are protected. The same thing with contraceptives, contraception, birth control, et cetera, and protecting all those exceptions, particularly for women who've been raped and victims of incest. I think it's his way. I can't speak for the man, but I imagine the crowd probably laughed, and I find some humor in it, but I think that's how passionate he is about IVF. And again, I've spoken to him privately about women's issues, and he knows how important it is.
And last, I want to ask you, this Univision town hall, we just learned that he reiterated his rhetoric and actually went further about Haitian migrants in Springfield, Ohio. He said, quote, they're eating other things too that they're not supposed to be. Do you think that rhetoric is helpful?
Well, I think that there's a lot of rhetoric that's unhelpful. You're talking about a man.
But I'm asking you about this. I'm asking you about this.
I know, but if you're going to bring up, if we're going to bring up rhetoric, let's talk about the rhetoric. This is a guy
I want to talk about Springfield, Ohio.
How many attempts have they had to try to assassinate him? In Ohio, I mean, there were videos, wacky videos online, and there were allegedly police reports. So if we're going to talk about rhetoric, I think we should talk about both sides, rhetoric from both sides. I am someone whose house has been vandalized 3 times in the last 4 years. My car has been vandalized twice. I receive threats on a daily basis. I can tell you, there's a lot of rhetoric out there that's not healthy for our country or its citizens.
And what about this particular rhetoric about Ohio?
I don't have any qualms about anything that Trump has said about Ohio. I think if we're going to talk about rhetoric, again, let's have a conversation about the rhetoric online, how elected officials are threatened, how there are attempted assassination attempts against Donald Trump and others. This is something that we should have a straightforward, honest, and bipartisan conversation about. It's something that goes on where I know that Democrat officials are threatened, Republican officials are threatened because of the violent rhetoric. I'm not worried about Ohio rhetoric. I'm more worried about rhetoric that might get somebody killed.
What he has said about Ohio has been false and has arguably endangered people there, but you have no qualms, to be clear, as you said, about his rhetoric about Ohio?
I don't have anything, nothing that I've seen about what he said about Ohio gives me any sort of pause. I am worried about violent rhetoric
even
that
the
puts
lies.
me and my family in danger. I'm afraid when the
Well, do you care about the other people,
where I live,
Congresswoman? I hear what you're saying about yourself.
I care about everybody. I care about everybody.
Do you?
I absolutely do. And I see it on both sides too. And I've called people out. I call the balls and strikes. But to my knowledge, no one in Ohio has been threatened because of something Trump has said about Ohio, when there have been people that have given interviews about some of the challenges they've had with immigrants that are there. I haven't seen that. I think I've seen more cat memes and jokes about it than anything else.
All right, I'll send you some information. Congresswoman, thank you so much. We appreciate your time.
I look forward to reading it. Thank you.
Well, as Stephen was just noting there is a gender gap here. Kamala Harris holding a clear edge among women. That's an advantage Donald Trump is hoping to cut into. Margaret Talev is a senior contributor for Axios and the director of the Institute for Democracy, Journalism, and Citizenship at Syracuse University. Margaret, always good to see you. I want to pick up on one of the things that we were just talking about with Stephen. So in that town hall earlier, yes, there were the comments about being the father of IVF. What struck me, though, is just before that question, a woman in the audience asked of the former president very specifically a question about abortion, and she said to him, why is government involved in questions about basic rights when it comes to a woman's body? It is a question that he could not answer, did not answer, pivoted to try to say, hey, these are all the things that we've done. We sent it back to the states. This is what everybody wanted, which we know is not accurate. The fact that there is not an answer for that, does it surprise you at all at this point in the campaign?
The messaging, Erica, on abortion, or what has been, I think, pretty successfully reframed by the Democrats in this cycle as not just reproductive freedoms, but bodily autonomy, personal choice. It's a very difficult area for Republicans to message. And you see it in IVF, which was invented in 1978 by two doctors in England while Donald Trump was developing a hotel in Manhattan. And what you see with IVF is that there is a massive cleavage in the Republican Party, or there has been historically, about IVF, because after all, it is the fertilization in a lab of an egg and a sperm. And so then you have an embryo, and what happens when you have no more use for the embryo, or when the embryos are rejected for genetic marker reasons. So it is not abortion. It's not the same issue as abortion, but it falls into that bucket of who gets to decide not just how to make decisions about their family, but how to, decisions about creating children, decisions about their personal health. And so far, Trump's approach to messaging on this, especially with this group of women that we're watching very closely, white working class women in 3 blue wall states, in Michigan and Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, his messaging on this has been to touch the issue, claim that he is the father of IVF, or wants to protect their rights by, as if turning issues back to the states would be a way to do that, and then to quickly pivot to 2 other issues that he's finding much more success messaging this group with. And those are inflation, how much money they have in their pocket, remember the pre-COVID days when Trump was president, and concerns about the border, crime, their personal safety, their children's safety. These are much clearer tracks for messaging for former President Trump and women who are winnable for him in this race.
When we look at this gender gap, and I think we do have the numbers from the most recent CNN poll, it is striking how it does fall on gender lines, right? The advantage among women, I think we can show for the vice president versus the former president, 51%, right, of women splitting over 36% for Donald Trump. And then if we show the numbers for the men, it sort of flips quite interestingly to show the way independent male voters are split a little bit more even, but still we're looking at 47 to 40%. When you look at, as you're highlighting, that perhaps winnable area for Donald Trump among women, as you were just noting, where are some of the winnable votes for Kamala Harris when it comes to bringing more men into the fold?
Well, college-educated voters have become, over the years, increasingly more aligned with the Democratic Party. And the flip side of this, non-college educated voters have moved more in alignment with the Republican Party. So for Vice President Harris, it is American men who have graduated from college or attended college, and it is also men of color. Yes, former President Trump has had more success than Democrats hoped in terms of pulling away some black male voters and certainly many Hispanic male voters. But voters of color, whether they're men or women, are certainly more aligned with with Vice President Harris's campaign. This is all, as you've said again and again, a question of margins.
Margins, and it'll also be a question of turnout, right? I mean, look, there are more women than men in the country at this point, but the reality is who turns out on election day will make the difference. Oftentimes, more women than men vote. We don't know if that'll happen in 2024.
And we do know that, again, it is this particular group of women, the white working class women in these blue wall states, because they may be disproportionately impacted by inflation and other economic issues. Some of them don't like former President Trump personally. Some of them disagree with his reproductive rights issues policies, but many of them are also anti-elite and respond to this anti-elite message and are more likely to say, and we've seen this in focus groups that we've conducted, are more likely to say, well, I don't really know Harris. I don't know what she believes in and stands for. And you don't see those same kind of responses with college-educated white women or with women of color, whether or not they're college educated. You don't see it the same way in the focus groups that you do with white women who did not attend college.